Hi everyone, and welcome to Thursday, January 28th's Healthy Dynamics for this brand new year, 2021. Welcome you to this program featuring John Moorman with Anchor Investment Management. John was with us last year in January when our landscape sort of looked very different. That was pre-COVID for the most part, and before Hopewell was well under construction and almost finished. So we've got a lot to talk about today with John. John will be talking about current investment opportunities and trends, issues, challenges, and that sort of thing. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome John Moorman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Moorman with Anchor Investment Management here in Columbia. And we're a locally owned investment manager and financial planner here in Columbia. We have clients throughout the Southeast. I'm delighted to be here with you today to give you an update on what we think are some trends and some happenings in the market, as well as the political and economic landscape. Our company produces a newsletter at the end of every quarter, and so it's time for that to happen now, and in my hands, I have the current version of the newsletter that has not even been mailed out yet. So I say that to you because you're going to be the first to hear some of this information. This is part of our thought process and what we see in the landscape. There'll be things that are right, there'll be things that are wrong, but we have a place to start, and I want to share that with you. Since our last commentary, a lot has happened. Obviously, President Biden has won the election. The two Georgia Senate races have been concluded, and those are both Democratic. That gives Democratic Party control of the executive branch, the House, and virtually control of the Senate. So this has not happened in a while, and since that time, in January, the Capitol has been stormed by a mob. President Trump appears to have been banned from all social media. Legislators from both parties are considering using the 25th Amendment to remove the president, and the House has voted to impeach the president for a second time in 4 years. So how has all this political upheaval and turmoil affected the stock market? It's gone straight up. From November 2nd, Election Day, until January 13th, the Dow Jones is up about 13%. If that trend stays the course through January, it'll be the largest 90-day gain of a presidential election time frame in history. That's sort of remarkable. We read the bad headlines, we read the turmoil, and yet the market tries to look forward to better days. We don't take too much comfort in the current political situation, but it does put a spotlight on the facts that politics and the stock market are not always the same thing. This doesn't dictate how many iPhones will be bought or boxes of cereal or prescription drugs will be purchased. If anything, the increase in stimulus will add to the supply of funds looking to make purchases and help the economy. We do believe, Anchor believes, that the U.S. is primed for a strong recovery in 2021, and there are two main reasons for that. One is that in 2020, we obviously had a gigantic slowdown in the economy, particularly related to the pandemic. So we'll be comparing earnings and economic growth to a year that was fairly slow. So that part is in our favor and on our side. But we think there are 5 reasons that you need to be aware of in terms of what the market looks like. You've read, many of you have seen that the government is quite busy sending out money, printing money to help this economy. We have increased the national debt in a tremendous way. That feels a little dangerous and a little odd. If there's one country that can do it, it would be the United States. Any other country has even a lesser stability rudder, and so we feel like while it wouldn't be the preferred method, it's the path that we're on. That extra money and the pent-up demand from last year's slowdown in economic spending will drive people, once the pandemic settles down, that'll drive people out of their house and more into the spending mode. Retail, cars, travel in particular has been left behind. So I think we'll see a gigantic upturn in that area. As you all know, in the last 20 and 30 years, even longer, we've experienced an amazing technological innovation time frame, and that seems like it will continue. These companies that are growing from a technology standpoint don't need plants and don't need as many workers, they don't need as much real estate. These are what we call asset-light companies that are able to grow their revenue and their profits without a lot of invested capital in the ground. That's a unique feature. This has been going on for a long time, and the market has agreed with that concept. The fourth thing is that these low interest rates that we've all been experiencing are here to stay for a good while. We're likely to see some inflation, but the interest rate itself, according to the Federal Reserve, they plan to keep that low. And so that leaves us with fewer alternatives in terms of earning interest or dividends on our money. That pushes money towards the stock market. And finally, we think that there's a very good chance that we'll get through this COVID-19 period. In the middle of last year, when we produced our newsletter, we weren't certain that a vaccine would be coming as fast as it has. We were glad to be wrong about that, and we obviously encourage everyone to take the vaccine seriously and let's do our part to get the herd immunity through our country. The bottom line is that we feel like equities, stocks, will do a much better job than bonds. The days of 5% and 6% are behind us, at least for the time being, and we think we can earn a better rate of return in high-quality companies paying dividends going forward. So that's a bit of a snapshot of what we think is a setup for 2021. We doubt that it will be a smooth path or a straight line, and there'll be lots more news to interpret, but we feel like we're on fairly sound footing going forward.
Okay, John, thank you for that summary. I think that's really, really interesting. I do have some questions that residents have asked and talked with me about that might get a little more in depth. So what is typically the effect of the change of administration, as in from one president to another? What is the
Sure.
typical?
I was telling someone the other day that since I have been born, we've had 12 presidents, 6 Republican, 6 Democrat, and in that span of time, we've had some bumps along the way, but overall, this has been a good run. So we advise folks not to put too much emphasis on just simply the change of administration, but the longer term picture. Having said that, what we do know is that by changing the party of administration, the Biden party clearly doesn't like some of the things that Trump did, particularly as related to taxes. We're likely to see some changes in that world. What we believe is that the corporate tax, what businesses pay, will be the first thing that they go after, and leave the individual tax rate for another battle. So that's the first thing we think we'll see.
Okay, interesting. So another question, why is the stock market doing so well when the economy really isn't? And you alluded to that, but just...
Well, there are two main things that generally drive the stock market. One is it tries to look forward to what will be, not what is. And what the market believes is that we will get the pandemic behind us, and we will see the pent-up demand show up in terms of growth of the economy and earnings. So you could debate whether it's ahead of itself or not, but that's what it's looking forward to over the horizon. The second thing is that the market always has to weigh the alternatives. And when we had 5% and 6% money market rates, you had a good alternative to put your money risk-free and earn a good rate of interest. Those days are gone, so the market is looking for other opportunities, and the market seems to be the best place.
Okay. Also, you talked about the stimulus and recovering, and several people have questioned, with all the stimulus money, the money being printed and all, when do we pay the piper?
Well, it's a very good and reasonable question. It's something that we think about. It frustrates us from time to time. I would tell you a couple of things. We all individually have to balance our checkbook. The federal government does not have to balance its checkbook. And so sort of the monolithic thinking that why aren't they doing what we do, or why are they doing something different? The answer is it's just the way that it is. And the government, of course, is trying to stimulate the economy, and right now they think this is the best method to do so. They also would prefer to have inflation of assets as opposed to deflation of assets. And so they're comfortable letting the inflation picture come back a little bit. The other thing that I would say is that our most recent experience has been 2008, 2009, in that Great Recession. The money that the government forwarded into the economy at that time went to the banks for the most part. Mm-hmm. Well, the banks don't spend it. They were intending to lend it, but that didn't fulfill itself. So now the government has circumvented that and given the money directly to the individuals. That money gets spent. You're seeing a better economy because of that.
Okay, that makes sense. John also had a question about something you alluded to as far as tech innovation doesn't take a lot of building, doesn't take a lot of staffing and that sort of thing. Sort of related to that is real estate, because folks have determined in lots of instances that they can work from home, that they don't need the big buildings and that sort of thing. How will this affect real estate, or how might it affect real estate?
Yeah, I think that's to be determined. There's clearly a movement to, whether it's moving out of the downtown buildings or out of the large cities. That was already happening a little bit before this pandemic accelerated that concept. Certainly the work from home is something that we'll be living with, but we don't feel like it's a permanent 5 days. It's more of 3 on, 2 off. There'll still be demand for office buildings. What we may not see is that companies stay in the same towns they're in. They're much more apt to move now, to follow a low tax rate. There are lots of businesses relocating to Texas and Tennessee and Florida and places like that where there might not be an income tax, or at least as heavy a tax. So that was happening before. This has accelerated it. New York is an easy target. Their ridership on their subways is plummeted because of the pandemic, and it hasn't returned. And so that will be a cost that city bears that other cities don't have.
Right.
So the landscape is, you could look at it, but I think we're in the early innings and we don't know what that'll shape up as.
Okay. Any way that we will, figures that you have seen, or any way we will know what the cost of COVID is? I mean, when does that come about in the whole scheme of things?
Well, I would think that is going to be, I'm not sure that that's something that they're after, that they're actually, whether they're looking for that number. And even if they were, I think it's very difficult. It's not a business equation only, it's a human capital, it's a human life equation. I think those types of things are enough of an unknown that the focus gets shifted to the results of the vaccine and the betterment of the disease, as opposed to how much did it cost on the front end.
Right.
I think that's a hard one to answer.
The financial cost of it. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have that I might have left out? We talked about interest rates a bit and about inflation. So what might we see with inflation? You said they might be comfortable with it going up some, but...
So there are a couple of things. The short term is simply the stimulus itself will generate more spending by individuals, which means more money chasing fewer goods. And it's probably no different than when there were no paper towels or toilet paper in the store. The prices of those items went up. So on a larger scale, that's probably where we're heading in the short term. The bigger picture, maybe to be somewhat concerned about, is demographics. We are an aging society in America, if you contrast that to China or India or places like that. So we may not have as many workers as we've had before to carry the cost of things like Social Security and Medicare. That's an issue. The government has kicked the can down the road on that for a long time and hasn't really solved that issue. We've got 10 or so years before it really gets bad. Let's hope they do something about it before then.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
We've had many questions from clients about estate tax changes, and right now each individual can leave $11 million plus to their spouse. That number is one that we could not have conceived of years ago. That number started at $600,000, then it went to $2 million and stayed there for a long time. It's crept its way up, and now for a husband and wife, it's in effect $22 million that you could leave estate tax free. That's a remarkably high number historically. We think that will be a number that is going to change. The Biden administration is already signaling they think they'll tackle that. We don't know that that's a 2021 issue, but we know it's on their radar. So people will likely do some planning that are in categories perhaps above 3 million, 4 million. That's probably the target.
Okay. Okay, so the stock market increased 13% between November and January. That is pretty amazing.
It was remarkable. In fact, we sort of think the whole year was remarkable in terms of its resilience, the way that it bounced back from the quick downdraft in March. We sort of think there's some silver lining to having a fast correction as opposed to a 2-year painful correction that drives people out of the market completely. So we were back in business fairly quickly. The market felt like we were going to solve this issue, and sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you don't think you're going to solve it, but the market looks ahead of that, and so that was a helpful thing. There was clearly relief that the election was over and that things were calm. That helped the market as well. and there's just simply a lot of money both on the sidelines and in the economy, and it's finding its way into the market.
Wow. How about new business starts?
So new business starts are an interesting thing. What used to be the main source of capital were banks, and we've got, you could argue, too many banks, and they have lots of money to lend, but they're not an easy place to borrow money. They have credit ratings that they need to uphold. And so when interest rates are low like this, there are other alternatives to find money for business startups. A lot of them are private equity money that comes in over the top of the bank and gets a business started. A lot of companies now are going public sooner than they used to, and that's money that they are able to acquire. So there are lots of avenues that are new compared to what we used to have. Now, we're having a bit of a slow time now. I think business starts are a slower reaction to the COVID panic in March than the stock market is. The stock market was quick to get back on its feet. I think business starts will be a little slower. There's so many restaurants, hotels, and other retail facilities like that are really still in bad shape. And so that's weighed on what you're describing there.
All right, okay. Well, stay tuned, right, for all these.
Stay tuned as always, right, and everything changes.
That's right, that's right. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
And just
Thanks for
really
having me.
appreciate it, and we'll
Absolutely.
probably have you back next year,
Love
same
to.
time.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank y'all so much for joining us today with John Moorman. I think he gave us a lot of really good insight and tips for things to look for and what we may see going on this year as we go further deep into 2021. Also want to remind you to check your internal mailboxes for the chocolate that always comes with Healthy Dynamics. We're really glad that y'all are so sweet to us. We want to offer some of that sweetness back to you. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.